Hey everybody, my name is Daryl and I have the pleasure of having Chris Vienna with us today, and we're going to be talking about Maya and the improvements that have been made in usability in Maya, and specifically Maya 2016. So obviously 2016 has a different look and feel to it. So what was the story behind that? Why now? What's going on with this change that we've made to the user interface?
So there's a couple things. I mean, in general, Maya had not had a kind of UI refresh in many years. A lot of the icons were starting to get dated, or they were inconsistent between various versions. And also, we were seeing a lot of these high DPI displays, whether that's a 4K monitor, these high DPI surfaces, or this Mac Retina Pro. Really, there's the ability to scale up and scale down the UI was really critical to a lot of our users, whether they were using Maya in different form factors. So all that combined together, we did the work.
So we've done some work there.
That's it.
What we've got going on here is we've got a MacBook Pro with a Retina display. And on this one, I've actually got Maya loaded up 2015 and then obviously 2016. So you can see on the 2015 build how small the words are. The icons they're all over the place and they're microscopic, right? So working on that isn't really that great, right? So obviously the 2016 build, we're running the icons here at 200%. So they're twice as large as a smaller icons, and on this high pixel count monitor, that makes a big difference.
Big difference, yeah.
Same thing on the Surface Pro, right? This, again, has a small screen with a very high DPI count, and Maya obviously looks easy to use.
Well, I think it's used. I think the idea is that it's usable. I mean, if you don't have this high DPI display, it's too small, or on the big monitor, you get 4K. There's 5K, that has been shown. The icons are just too small for you to use.
Sure, and one thing that's kind of cool about the Surface is actually, this has got the ability to use the multi-touch inside of Maya. So as I click on the screen, I can zoom in, zoom out, pan, track, all the kind of gestural stuff, the multi-touch gestural stuff that we added to Maya. I think it was a couple of releases ago that we added that gestural stuff. So not only did we take the time to make the icon scalable, but obviously we've gone to sort of a flat look. This actually is, there's a reason behind it. There's science behind it. If you look at things like street signs, they're all flat because they're easier to recognize and read. And another thing that was interesting is if you look at, as we jump through these shelves, which again have been completely, like the old shelves were kind of re-engineered, thrown away, new ones are here. They're color-coded, so you can immediately tell NURBS, curves, and surfacing tools, which sort of fall in that same kind of workflow, are one color. Polygon tools and the new sculpting tool set, again, are sort of the same color. So new users are going to be able to immediately recognize, well, that must work on polygons because of its color, or that's going to be a NURBS tool or a dynamics tool, based all on the color. So things like FX and FX caching, again, are also all the same colors. Another thing that was done with the user interface was changing this top menu bar and the filtering of where tools live. So you've always had the ability to switch between different, they're not really different modules, but it would just filter out what was displayed in that top bar, because you can't have everything on there, it would go forever.
Yep.
And this has been changed. So we now have things like modeling, rigging, animation. So in modeling, it's got what used to be the polygon tools as well as the NURBS tools.
Yep.
And you'll notice that some of these things are going to be redundant. So things like deformers are in the actual modeling tools, which is interesting. The reason that that's done is because it's kind of task-based now, right?
Yep.
On my blog, I had a couple people say, I can't find this tool. How do I find that tool? So here's a tip for you guys. If you go to the Find menu, there's underneath the top section now is Find. The Find menu used to be buried.
Yes, which was ironic.
Smart,
yes.
right? So if you go to the Find menu and you type something like, I don't know, like a deformer, like wire, you'll see that actually does live in, it lives in rigging, it lives in modeling, it lives in lots of different places, right? So the idea, again, is that same tool might be in multiple places.
Thanks to the community that were involved in the beta, a lot of conversation about which things revolved in each, in which section. And again, things like deformers, it was used to do modeling. So again, somebody coming into Maya, it makes sense to have deformers there for modeling and also in animation as well. So, again, we're not adding more code, it just makes it more discoverable.
So another big change in Maya 2016 was improvements made to the hypershade window. So let's go ahead and pull that up. Obviously, the hypershade can be a panel or it could be docked. And in 2016, the node editor's here. A node editor we started a couple of releases ago. So in this presentation, we'll be talking about stuff that's in 2016. And some of these things are kind of a multi-release effort. Like we started them back in 2013, 2012 maybe even. So in general, we've been moving toward making Maya more accessible, trying to make it easier to use for new users or people transitioning from other applications. And at the same time, hopefully making it faster for veterans and legacy users by reorganizing things. Yes, you might have to learn where they are, but there's logic behind it. So you will work more efficiently once you get over that, hey, they've moved this button to here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you do the reorganization, we've all had, moved app to app and lost our way. And again, hopefully the investment that we've made, in the end, you feel, oh, this is great. I'm happy with the changes that have been made. And again, it's still customizable. I can still make my own shelves. I can still reorder all this stuff. And again, we'll talk things like the hotkey editor. I can still customize Maya to exactly how I want it.
So Hypershade window, obviously, is its main graphing system is now the node editor,
Yep.
which is great.
Yep.
Node editor brings a lot of kind of modern workflows to it, a lot of fast, easy things. It replaces what used to be the multi-lister and the connection editor all directly inside of this window.
Yep.
Awesome,
and it
love
doesn't
that.
look like it was made in 1995.
Also very helpful.
Yeah.
But in 2016, there's been big changes in the sense that we can now take any of these other windows and actually dock them directly inside of this. So it becomes a complete looked at environment.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and just grab a few of these out. We'll grab something like the property data editor. We'll drop this over here. It's worth mentioning that I'm running in SP1. Everyone make sure you update to Surface Pack 1. A lot of the kind of growing pains that the Hypershade window had as far as its kind of stickiness. Like you close it down, you open it back up, did it remember my settings, things like that. A lot of those kind of workflow bugs have been sort of addressed in SP1. So make sure that if you haven't gotten onto SP1, take the time to download this patch. It's not the full download.
Yep.
So we got the property editor in there, and I'm going to go ahead and grab this material view also, and we'll just push that guy up there. So what the property editor does, it allows me to have a filtered view. You can see that we're in the view for look dev. So the property editor, similar to the attribute editor, it is the attribute editor. It's just a filtered version of it. And the idea behind this is to only present the things that are really the most useful. So how do we come up with these lists?
The designers went, node by node, and then they picked, with the help of the beta, the features that they thought people needed.
And if you want to get back to the full,
you can
the full
always bring it
version,
back.
oops, wrong button. You can obviously tear that off, but you can get back to the full, massive version that has a bunch of things that
That's it.
you're probably not going to want to touch.
And again, if you're being new to Maya, again, the idea being that this is a much more friendly view for you to kind of get your introduction.
So the first experience is going to be the one that 90% of the time you're going to want to go to and touch.
Yep.
So another thing that's kind of interesting about this, obviously we have the ability to change different materials, different preset shapes for viewing in your kind of preview window here. And we can also switch to different renderers. So if we jump over to something like Mental Ray, this is going to, let's grab like a Mental Ray material, something that's a little more dynamic, like this car paint material. It's being lit by an area light. You're going to get all the control here. This is actually a ray traced preview. And we can also switch the environment that this lives in. So right now it's just lit by an area light, but if you wanted to see what it looks like in a real environment, you can go ahead and start loading up IBLs that then obviously kick in indirect illumination, secondary light, and you can add in your own IBLs too. So this is actually fully supported with the color management system inside of Maya. And again, we're trying to allow you to preview materials without committing to render. So it gives you a nice sort of halfway step, I guess, is the way I think of it.
Well, I think it's, again, when people talk about this, you sort of get lost in here. They're kind of going through all these things, and obviously there's other abilities for you to preview nodes inside of the graph and kind of zero in on what everything is doing. And again, the technology that we put in the color management, you can have your viewport in here and be able to see kind of a real good preview of what each node is doing, instead of kind of guessing and rendering and then trying to reverse engineer problems with your graph.
Yeah, and the other thing that's kind of nice about this is if I grab something like both of those guys and put them on top of each other, you can start to get tabs inside of here. You can dock things. Very flexible in its configuration. And one of the things that you mentioned that I think is kind of cool about this is not only do we have the ability to do all this great graphing work that's actually saved with the scene, so your graphs are saved in these multiple tabs, but we have a really nice soloing option or workflow inside of here that allows you to really focus in on a certain part of your scene. So if we jumped over to maybe his suit and we soloed something like just the texture map on his suit, as soon as you hit the solo button, what it does is it switches it to a 2D view inside of here of that, and it kills the lighting in your 3D viewport. So you're seeing just the straight color of that. If you solo something like a bump map, what it does is it actually puts that bump map on without any diffuse color. So you're seeing the lighting contribution because obviously with the lighting you're going to need to, that's how you're going to see the bump, or the normal in this case. But it again lets you isolate exactly what you're trying to do. And one of the things that's kind of nice about this is there's some hotkeys in here that a lot of people don't know about. If you hit Shift 1, it allows you to toggle back and forth between your last two soloed objects. If you right mouse click when you're in the soloing, you can always go up here and turn on and off the solo features with a marker menu. So a lot of things inside of Maya you can access via hotkeys or the gestural swipes of the marker menus, or if you wanted to use traditional drop-downs. There's lots of ways to get to the same result. We're trying to continually improve the workflow to make it accessible. And I think that the soloing workflow is one of the things that really is awesome about 2016. One of the other things that's kind of cool about this is it's kind of a hidden thing, but if we're soloing this texture map right here, obviously it switched over to the 2D view for us, and I've gone back to the hardware material view. If you double click on the output, you can see that it will basically switch that, and it's showing me in the viewport also what we're seeing here. So any out channel, if you just double click on it, that's going to switch what's soloed, and the little triangle shows you what feature is actually being soloed inside of there. Another thing that the Hypershade window allows you to do is you can load multiple objects up into the property view just by shift clicking them. So there's lots of really kind of little subtle things that are sort of here, and once you start playing around with it, you kind of stumble upon them and you realize that it's going to make you work faster and more efficiently. All right, so that's the Hypershade window inside of Maya 2016. Gives you a really nice, complete look dev environment that's pretty awesome. So the next thing that I want to talk about is another big change inside of Maya, and that's been all the work that's happened with modeling. So this is something that we started a few years ago. We actually made a dedicated modeling team that was new. So let's talk about what the next guys did. And they had probably the most popular Maya plugin,
Yeah, it was one of the most popular,
the next modeling toolkit. So we got that technology. We've been working and integrating it. Not only did we get it, but we got the guys. And 2016, I think, we say it's integrated now. There's no more on-off button. A lot of the tools that worked in Next and had a counterpart in Maya, now it's just one set of tools that work the same, whether you're executing them from the drop-down menu or the menu on the right-hand side or the marker menu to turn them on, or if you're executing them in the panel view, which a lot of people love this panel workflow. The panel workflow for new users is a little bit more accessible than trying to dig through a bunch of drop-down menus or using marker menus or gestures or even shelf buttons. Having a lot of those modeling tools kind of sitting right in this one panel, a lot of people love that, right?
I mean, again, I think also, the again, talking about kind of the work we had to, there was two features sometimes. Sometimes it was about taking one feature over another. Sometimes it was merging the best of both. So there was a lot of work, a lot of detail work, a lot of nuances kind of put into the design of, merging all those features together. And again, thanks to the beta users, it's also the most active beta forum that we have.
Okay. So you go to the system preferences now, and modeling toolkit stuff's just in there.
That's it.
So let's walk through here, because it is a little different looking in 2016 with the user interface changeover. It's also got different menus now. So you have mesh tools, component tools, and then kind of the tools and the multi-cut and the quad draw and the target weld being the ones that I think most people, that was their bread and butter, was that multi-cut tool. And it's gotten better underneath Autodesk's tenureship, I guess. It's kind of improved a bit, and we'll kind of see these a bit in more context. But I want to draw your attention to a couple of the things just modeling related and some of the visual feedback. We're trying to really get more visual feedback in the viewport, more kind of contextual stuff happening in the viewport. So I'm going to draw your attention to a few things that we changed. So if we right mouse click on top of this guy and go into a phased select mode, you can see that this pre-selection highlighting, this is something that every release we've been working on it. The next guys had some awesome pre-selection highlighting. It's all the same now, which is great. And if we jump over here and turn on symmetry and we do something like, I don't know, world-based X symmetry, you can see that pre-selection highlighting has changed to a different color. So that's showing me that it's got the ability to match across the x-axis to a counterpart. So what happens if we turn that pre-selection highlighting off? And here's a pretty cool little hidden feature, I guess. It's probably in the dock somewhere, but good luck finding it. If you middle mouse button on that arrow, it toggles between your last state. And that middle mouse button you can do on these drop-down menu bars also to execute your last tool. So
that's
if
cool.
There's lots of little things that are kind of, I don't know, I think they're awesome. They make work into Maya so fast, but you have to know about them. So I'm here to hopefully get some people to know about them that maybe didn't read the manual. So the middle mouse button lets me turn off that symmetry really quickly, and you can see that if we grab something like our soft select tool, and again, the soft select now is the same soft select options are exactly the same here as they are in the tool options. That's something that's again making the tool feel it's not slapped on anymore. It's just the modeling toolkit is just Maya's modeling.
It's Maya, yeah.
Modeling toolkit is Maya modeling now. So we'll make this asymmetrical. We'll give him a little, he got whacked in the nose. He's Canadian, plays hockey.
Yeah.
So we've got some asymmetry in our face now. So if we jump back into that symmetry tool, and let's go ahead and select faces here, move across this, you can see that obviously you can find a match in a lot of areas, but when it can't find a match, it just jumps to red. So we're trying to give visual feedback in the viewport. Really quickly, easy to understand what's going on.
And trying to keep people in the viewport, trying to be able to not have to jump out and switch menus and switch views all the time just to do some simple repetitive operations.
So if I wanted to make changes to both sides of the mesh, the modeling toolkit had topology symmetry. So let's go ahead and check that out. So if we jump in here and we say, you know what, jump over to topology mode, it's going to ask me to select a mesh. We can turn off that pre-selection highlight. And all you have to do is make sure that you have a center line down your object, right? So double click on that guy. So now if we move across this, you can see that it has the ability to find a lot more matches than it did before, obviously. Pretty straightforward there. And the thing that's kind of nice about this is if we go into that soft select mode and grab a face here, you can see that it has the ability to match across both sides with soft select. And we've got these really awesome transformation constraints. So this is something, again, that the modeling toolkit brings to the table. So if I wanted to reposition those edges but not have the shape change, I can just turn on the transformation constraints and just put the slide surface. And again, this works with symmetry turned on. So you can see that as I move those edges around, that contour, that profile of that head isn't changing. We're just repositioning where those edges live sort of on that mesh, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
So let's jump down here and look at the next example of this guy. So we'll turn that off and we'll turn that off. And that is what happens when we have a piece of geometry. This is actually two pieces of geometry, so we'll use that separate command that happens on the mesh level to get to be two separate pieces of geometry. If we want to make some modeling changes to this, but clearly it's not symmetrical. So traditionally, the topology symmetry would fall apart here.
Yes.
So this was improved in 2016. Yep. You can now have partial symmetry.
Yep.
You still need to have that part line down the middle of your mesh. You still need to define that part line. But if we go in here and we say topology-based symmetry, it's going to, again, ask me to define the mid of that guy. So we do that. And now if we jump in here and start grabbing the faces, you can see that everywhere it can find a match, it's happy. As soon as we jump to an area that obviously doesn't have a match, it's not going to work. So let's start doing some modeling changes to this. The first one that we're going to do is just do a simple extrude. So we'll grab those two faces. We'll jump over here. Again, I'm just using this panel view to do all my modeling. I don't have to use marker menus or drop-down menus or shelves. Everything's contained right here in this panel. We'll do this extrude, and you can see that I get this little pop-up. Mm-hmm. So what's going on with the pop-up?
Well, that's an in-view editor. This is, again, something that was added as people, again, wanted to kind of keep in context. They wanted to have the small number of attributes that were kind of tailor-made to the task that they were doing. So again, this is something that, again, kind of builds on Maya's customizability. You can change it. You can make your own stuff. It's great. People are really liking it.
So it's basically a filtered view of what you would have in all these attributes for that poly extrude,
yep.
right? So if I always wanted to see local scale X, I can turn that on, and the next time I execute that tool, it's going to be there. One of the things that's kind of cool about this is you can make it bigger, mm-hmm. obviously. You can also toggle on and off things like the Boolean switches. So instead of having to click in the field and hit 0 or 1, I just click on it. If it's a Boolean, it's going to automatically switch back and forth between 0 and 1. So trying to make things easier for people to work with.
Well, again, it's in the viewport. It's kind of keeping you in context. We've put a lot of effort into viewport 2.0 to kind of show these high fidelity models. So again, you don't really want to have your UI crowding onto that. So this is just a way to quickly bring up a UI, make the changes, and then dismiss it.
And another thing that is kind of nice about this is you can copy attributes and then paste attributes. So if I've made some really fancy bevel, or I want to replicate this kind of little divot extrude in multiple places, I can copy those attributes and then just go in here and grab another face, hit my G key to repeat that extrude. G is the hotkey to repeat your last tool, and it's worth mentioning that the Y key in the modeling toolkit now works because those are just tools, right?
Yep.
Just like Maya. So if
Yep.
you're in a multi-cut tool and you exit out of it, you want to get back into it, hit the Y key, which is execute last tool in Maya. It works. That's new in 2016.
Yes.
I can just paste these attributes in there, and just like that, we've now got those guys doing the exact same function. So let's talk about a couple of other things that are kind of cool. Selection constraints are really pretty cool because they allow you to say, from this, if this threshold isn't exceeded, do something, right?
Yep.
So if we go to angle-based and we hit something like 20, and I go in here and I say select a face, every face that's within 20 degrees of the current face that I'm on top of is going to get highlighted, right? And if I wanted to add to my selection, I can just hit Control-Shift, and you'll see that when if I hit Control, I get the minus sign on my arrow. If I hit Control-Shift, that's only add to my selection. So you can see that I can really quickly start to add in, to these areas, that selection based on that angle threshold, and start to grab things like that. And if I wanted to start, maybe moving this around based on some pivot information, well, we've changed the way the pivot workflow works a little bit, and that's from feedback I heard from the Softimage.
Well,
users.
again, we're kind of on the first year of the Softimage transition, and again, we've been very lucky that many of the people who were active in the Softimage beta community made the switch over to Maya. And they had a lot of things that they wanted to see in Maya in order for them to switch, and one of them was this pivot workflow. And again, as they kind of presented it to the community, the Maya people were very happy to say, yeah, no, that looks great for me. So we really worked pretty hard on the pivot workflow.
All right, so to get into the pivot workflow, you could either come down here in the modeling toolkit and hit the edit pivot, or you could hit the insert key or the D key on Maya. So if you hit the D key, and I start to move this pivot around, you can see that my cursor, again, is giving me this visual. It tells you what it's doing. It's aligning that pivot to my current selection. So that's just kind of a free-form move. If I hold down my Shift key, it's going to do an orientation. So I can orientate it to a face, a point, and if I hit my Shift key, it's going to do a position, and the Control key is going to do the orientation. And if I hold down different keyboard combinations, I can aim my Z-axis to a certain thing, I can aim my X-axis to another thing. So it's a really fast, easy tool to start working with. If you are in this pivot mode and you right mouse click, you get your radial pop-up that it gives you options. So the radial pop-ups change, they're contextual.
Yep.
So if I wanted to get to, if I do something like a reset pivot, that's essentially the same as the old modify center pivot command. Right?
Except you didn't have to go to the menu.
Except I didn't have to go to the menu, right?
Yeah.
So I could just hit D, marker menu down, hit D again, and I've centered my pivot on that object.
And again, these are the the stuff you do. These are operations people do hundreds of times a day. And again, you really want these things to be smooth, right, and easy to repeat.
Well, another thing that people do all the time is move normal, right? So this is a great one. If you grab a face, let's turn off that selection angle based, and I want to move that based on its current normal. If I just control middle mouse button, I'm now moving that face on its normal, or I could do an edge or a point on its normal. So control, middle mouse button, again, I'm sure it's buried in the manual.
Well, there's also,
Somewhere.
I mean, you talked about, also the fact that there's hotkeys embedded into the modeling toolkit as well.
Yes, this is true. This is very true. Like if we go to the multi-cut tool, and I love this. This is great. You go down to the keyboard shortcuts, it's right there.
Yep.
You don't have to dig around to find the information. So one more thing that I want to talk about before we start playing around with some of these other tools like the cut tool and the weld tool and the quadro tool is some of the other little things that happen up here with this when you select components inside of Maya. So if we go back to our selection tool, and let's say I grab some verts. So we'll say let's select verts, and I could switch my type of selection either to multi-component or just straight verts here. And let's say I grab that vert and this vert, and then I say, you know what, I want to grab some faces. So watch what happens when I click over to the select face. It goes back to the last face that I had selected. If I click on the vert button, it goes back to the last vert. So it kind of remembers when you were in vert mode, what were the last things you had selected versus where you were face mode when you click between these icons. Now, if for some reason you wanted to convert that selection, you could use like the control right mouse button, convert to verts or whatever, but that's hard for new users, right? So if you just control click, hold down the control key, which is sort of like the modifier key inside of Maya, and click on the verts, it's going to convert that selection for you. So there's lots of little things that are sort of not right off the bat in your face in 2016, but when you kind of dig around a little bit, or if you do open the manual and read it, you're going to find all these little hidden gems. So let's talk about the multi-cut tool, because this one is like I said before, this was the one that I think the multi-cut and the quad draw were the one that people were like, that's amazing. Yep. That's the tool I want. So multi-cut replaces lots of different tools inside of Maya. So what can it do? Well, it can do things like grab along an edge, hold down your shift key. We've added the percentage snapping now. So the first time you hit shift, it's going to go right to the middle point. If you click and then drag, it allows you to start knocking those guys off in 10% values. If you right click to complete it, if you middle mouse button drag across multiple objects, it's going to cut across all those faces. So that's one thing that it does. You can also drag and slice across. You could tell it when you're doing these slices, do you want it to extract the faces, duplicate the faces? So this is what the multi-cut tool, it does a lot of stuff, right? Yep. Can also take and start drawing on the interior faces, right? So something like that was the old the poly slice tool, yep. I think, or the poly draw tool.
Well, again, I think as we did a lot of these consolidations of tools, sometimes the old tool was taken, sometimes the new tool was taken, sometimes it was a combination of the two. So multi-cut, again, as you said, there's a lot of requests from some of the older features in trying to make the new one better. And so it's really the best of both worlds.
So Control does edge loop insert. It just really does have a ton of functionality directly inside of the tool. So something that was newly added in 2016, let's just, we'll grab this guy right here. So we'll grab the middle point on that. We'll hold down our shift key. If I hit Control Shift, you can see that I now get these little arrows, these little 90-degree angles. So it allows me to go 90 degrees off the start or the end curve that I'm trying to go to. So little stuff like that, mm-hmm. Control Shift brings that up. That was newly added in 2016. All right, so another one that's really pretty awesome is the quad draw tool. So if you're trying to take a high-res mesh, make it a low-res mesh, or quickly start laying out, retopologizing objects and things like that, that's what the quad draw tool really excels at. So if you look at this ground plane, let's get back to object mode here. This was, all this terrain was done through recap.
Yep, photogrammetry.
Photogrammetry. So it's a dense polygon triangulated mess.
Polygon soup, yeah.
Perfect for renders.
Yeah.
If I was doing XGen, I'd probably want to have something a little bit cleaner to work with. Yep. If I was doing maybe a collision object for a rigid body sim or something like that, I might not want just chaos, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where the quad draw tool comes into play, and it can do some really fast polygon modeling with this guy. Let's go ahead. Let's undo that really quickly.
These workflows come in whether you're doing maquettes, these big Mudbox or ZBrush maquettes, or whether you're doing laser scans or whatever. There's just really a lot of demand from Maya artists to have to kind of do this. And again, in some cases, people have to leave the application, or they felt like they had to leave. We want people to stay in the application and kind of do the workflows in here.
So we're going to make that surface live. It tells me that it's live, which is again nice visual feedback there. We'll grab this quad draw tool, and I just literally start laying down points, holding down my shift key to then take those points and turn those into polys. And in a matter of a few seconds, I can start really cranking this stuff out. If I hold my control key down, I can start inserting more loops into these, and all the points that are added are basically constraining to that live surface. If we go and we hit our tab key and switch our extend to do a border, I can just start dragging this out. So really very fast, we can start to add in detail where we want it. Another thing that you can do that's kind of cool with this is if you hold the tab key down and just start dragging, you can start to, again, just start laying down a polygon strip, then hold that tab key again and extend those edges out. So it's a very fast tool to work with. Lots of functionality in here, things like the relaxing tool, or if I wanted to start merging these guys together, it's going to auto-weld those points together. So it allows you to work extremely quickly to get to this low-res geometry derived from that sort of high-res mesh. So the next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is UV workflow. So this is something that we started probably 2015, I think, was the Unfold 3D, which was, it's a pretty amazing algorithm,
yep,
right?
It's a great algorithm, yeah.
So with the UV Unfold tools inside of Maya, it allows you to really quickly get meshes that don't have a lot of stretch and squash in them. They're very well resolved results that the Unfold 3D engine comes up with.
And it can also handle a lot denser meshes than the previous algorithm.
All right, so let's go ahead and check this out. Let's bring up the UV editor. And first thing you'll notice in the UV editor is the color management stuff's here. So that what's going on here?
Well, again, that one of the big works, again, a lot of the stuff, kind of goes under the hood and it comes up. And again, putting the viewport 2 and all of the goodness of the color management into the UV editor was one of the big tasks for 2016.
So this is just a standard view?
Standard view.
Pretty much. All right, so let's go ahead and get some UVs on this object. So we'll go and we'll say modeling, and we'll create some UVs. And we'll do a planar map on these guys down the z-axis. That's fine. So we'll project those down. So obviously that's going to have a lot of overlap, right? Like those UVs are all stacked up on top of each other. This isn't going to work, right?
No.
So we need to go in here and we need to start making some shells and unfolding this. So if I hit Control-1, it's a hotkey to just toggle my selection, and I've got hardware fog on here, so we'll turn that off so it looks a little bit better. And with that done, we can frame in on this guy and we can start just doing some simple selections on these guys to start to, we'll grab that, let's see if that goes all the way around. Did that go all the way around? This one will. So we're going to start breaking these guys up. So we'll do that, and we're going to go ahead and just cut that. So I'm going to cut this into a couple different shells using my cut tool, and we'll just kind of cut up here on the back side too, somewhere like, grab that one, and I think this is probably the match to that. Close enough if it's not. So with that done, I've now got shells that I can start to reposition, right? So because this is just a standard Maya view, things like double-clicking on it selects a shell, right? You can see these guys are going backwards. Obviously, that's projected through, so that's why it looks red. So I can start to isolate these guys out. And now what I'd want to do is I'd probably want to run that unfold command on these guys to get rid of all that overlap and try to get a nice flattened out decal of this, right? So inside of Maya, if we grab all the UVs and jump to that polygon menu and run the unfold, we'll bring this up, and we'll go back to the default settings, and we'll say apply. So what Maya does is it goes through, it unfolds it, and with the pack algorithm turned on, it's going to try to push this into the 0 to 1 tile, which you can visualize right here. We've done a lot of work with tiles inside of Maya. Obviously, we support it both in the viewport as well as the file texture nodes now. It's really easy. It's just, you turn it on, it just works, basically.
And it was a real nightmare before to get it to work and to get it to work with your renderer of choice. And so there's been a lot of work just sort of to also make it work with all the different packages and Maris and ZBrushes and Mudboxes and all the different options that come in. So yeah, no, there's been a lot of work done to it.
So that's nice that the unfold tool packed that into 0 to 1. It flipped the objects that were backwards. It took care of all the problems, but sometimes that's not what you want. You really do want this guy in tile 1. You want this guy over here. Like you might spend the time to really get these guys kind of where you want them, but you still need to unfold it, right? So what happens if I take this guy, and you can see that double click working again. Awesome, love that. And we run the unfold without the pack on. It does an okay job, but sometimes it might spin these guys around, right? Like if we unfold, oops, I did that the wrong way. Let's unfold that guy without the pack turned on. You can see, like on that guy, it just
kind of flipped him a bit, yeah.
It didn't know what to do, right? So that's not cool. So in previous versions of Maya, the legacy unfold had the ability to pen certain areas. And you could kind of set a guideline, like I'm going to take this center line, lock these guys down, and unfold from that point.
Yep.
So 2015, that functionality wasn't there.
Nope.
We addressed that in 2016. We have a new pinning workflow, and it's pretty straightforward. So what you can do is you can grab some UVs. We'll grab those guys, and you know what? Before I do that, let's go ahead and just jump over to pen, and we'll pen those guys. And you can see that it's color-coded based on that. Let's just double-click this and unfold those guys. So you can see, once we define that edge, it gives the unfold something to basically a starting point. And that then resolves itself properly and gives me the result that you would expect, right? Which is pretty awesome. So another thing that is kind of nice is we now have brush-based tools directly inside the UV window. And you could use these brush-based tools to do things kind of in isolated areas. They work with that penning. Like, so if I wanted to freeze a certain area, like let's just say I grab this brush and I start painting in here, this is all based on the opacity of that. So I've frozen those verts 100%, and then kind of some partial freezing there. So then if we go back to this brush-based unfold, and I start to paint on this, you can see that if I increase that brush here, it's going to unfold, but those verts that I painted that area aren't going to go along for the ride. So these brush-based tools are interesting because they're actually the same brush-based tools that we have in our sculpting tool set. It's using
the same engine.
The same engine.
Yeah.
And that was done to test the API, I was told.
Well, I mean, again, it was a test of the API, but I mean, it wasn't, again, we wanted to make sure that, we had, the designer had an idea of, again, these brush-based workflows, and we wanted to see if we could reuse the technology that we did in sculpting, and again, we were super happy that we were able to do that, because this is a super intuitive way to kind of deal with, again, the problems that always come up when you're doing UV workflows.
Right. So another thing that's kind of nice is the brush-based cut. I love this one, and the brush-based, sew. So with the brush-based cut, I can increase my brush size a little bit here, and I can literally start to resolve or solve paths that would be really, really, kind of a pain to select. And if I make a mistake, I can just hit my control key, go back, kind of clean that guy up, and this allows me to really start to carve out these shells exactly the way I want. And then obviously if I go in here and I select a face and double click on it, that's now a separate shell, which is pretty awesome. And then obviously we've also got a brush-based sewing tool. So with that brush-based sewing tool, I can just go back and start to stitch those guys back up. So the brush workflow in the UV window is it's pretty awesome, actually.
It's awesome, yeah.
I'm totally happy with it. So that's some of the improvements that were made to UVs both in 2015 as well as 2016 with the pinning and the brush-based tools. So the next thing that we want to talk about, and we kind of started talking about this a little bit, was the sculpting workflow inside of Maya. And if we hit Control-1 again, which is that hotkey, and there's also a button right here for Isolate View Selected, which is right on your shelf or on your filter bar here. So Isolate Select is now either Control-1 if we have an object selected, or this little icon with the arrow select next to it. So a couple little changes there. Let's go ahead and check out the brush-based workflow inside of Maya 2016. So if we jump over here to our sculpting tools, notice that they're the same color as the polygon tool, so that's giving me a visual representation as to
what it's meant for.
What it's meant for, right? So why sculpting in Maya when we have things like Mudbox?
So again, Maya has a lot of workflows relative to animation. So a lot of shape-based workflows, and again, a lot of the workflows we were seeing from users, a lot of the requests we were seeing from users was the ability to be able to author shapes inside of Maya, to work with blend shapes, and also work with a lot of the the deformers and a lot of the systems inside of Maya. So again, we were able to take the Mudbox engine, port it over, but also we improved a lot of the Mudbox engine in some things that you'll see, and that came back to Mudbox. So again, Mudbox can, and again, ZBrush and these other applications for concept design can continue to exist, and again, Maya can be used with sculpting to do very specific things. But we're also seeing on the web already people doing really awesome, cool things with sculpting, like from scratch and from some concept stuff. So again, there's a lot of room to improve.
So one of the things that's kind of nice about having the sculpting tools in Maya, it allows you to work in conjunction to maybe your camera, or if you've got some other deformations that are kind of tied to a given piece of geometry, they can go along for the ride. So something like this eyebrow, if I use this grab brush and I start to pull that up, you can see that eyebrow is attached to this head with a wrap deformer. So if I change the underlying topology or geometry that's driving that wrap deformer, it kind of goes along for the ride. Another thing that's kind of cool about the sculpting tools is because Maya had things like different types of fall off, like the surface fall off, when you use a grab brush now, if you wanted to lift an upper lip, that's something that's really easy to do because we have that, this multiple varieties of types of fall off. So one of the things that's also kind of cool is the grab brush has this really cool twist, which I love that. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, also, again, you can, with things like open subdiv, you can, sculpt to the limit surface. There's a lot of things that you can visualize inside here that you wouldn't necessarily visualize in a non-animation package. So again, as long as people use it in the right context, they're going to be happy. And the performance is actually pretty good in terms of the amount of polys that it can push around.
All right, so there's been some improvements to rigging too, right? This is something that I think every release for the last few releases, we've come up with like a new way of skinning characters that, they've all been really cool. Heat map skinning, awesome, but it had some limitations. It needed to be sort of clean geometry. It needed to sort of be
towards the end of the pipeline. Everything had to be kind of ready and rock and roll. And again, one thing to note as you kind of cue this up is that a lot of the engineers were working this year on the animation performance. Your previous webinar kind of walked through a lot of the work that was done on that. And again, there was just a lot of smaller improvements done on animation and rigging. But if you add them up over the last few years, definitely a lot of work done to improve ease of use.
Yeah, and one of them is actually just something as simple as laying down joints inside of skeletons. Like when you're trying to lay down joints in a character, it's complex. It's you're positioning joints in three-dimensional space. That was hard to do in kind of flat plane of views. Your top view, your front view, your side view. So it's a really simple thing, and I'm not sure what you probably remember what release this came out in.
I think it's 2013.
2013. Some of the options for the joint tool. So if you turn on x-axis on the symmetry and you turn on the project center, now this is an option in the joint tools, but it really is just it's just a snapping option in your toolbar, right? So by turning on that projected to snap to center, if we grab something like this neck joint and start dropping these guys down now, you can see that obviously it's doing both sides at the same time, and you can see how quickly I can start to go in here and start to really lay down, some very complex joints directly inside of this object really, really very easily, which I think is pretty awesome. So I'll grab in a couple more fingers here. We'll just grab this guy and we'll add in maybe a couple more fingers there. So in a matter of a few seconds, we were able to go ahead and obviously build up joints that would take a lot longer to do in 3D view.
Mm-hmm.
So with those joints done, the next thing that we're going to do is we're just going to grab this whole hierarchy, right? This is a pretty big hierarchy of objects.
A lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff, and there's obviously things like this guy that are separate pieces, but we want to make sure that they kind of match the weighting going up to these other guys, and we're going to use the geodesic voxel binding skinning to just take this whole mess of objects, some of them are good, some of them are bad, and bind them into the skeleton to give me my starting point. So this is one of those, it's like a magic button, right? I think the heat map skinning kind of was another one of those. So if we jump over to our rigging section here,
I think really again what it is that there's different algorithms. Certain things will be good for certain scenarios, and certain algorithms will be better for others. So this again going to the the geodesic voxel binding, again, this is just really good. You have this multi-object mesh. Maybe it's not watertight. Maybe it's something that again you're not totally finished, but it really gives a great result out of the box, and you can kind of just throw your computer at it and get a decent result.
Sure. So one of the things that it does really nicely, obviously it deals with multiple meshes. They don't have to be closed. But areas where traditionally these verts are kind of close to this this bone, they would sort of bunch in and they'd get influenced by that bone. It does a great job of kind of finding and isolating what joint should have what vert associated with it. In traditional problem areas, things like fingers and stuff like that, it just does a really good job of that stuff right off the bat. And then obviously areas where there's multiple pieces of geometry, it's preserving the volume really nicely, and you can see that it's not tearing this separate piece of geometry off of that piece. These weights, these verts that are close to each other have weights that are appropriate.
Yep.
So it's just a great tool. Now, obviously you'd go through and you'd still paint weights on this, but this is going to get you 90% of the way, or if you've got something you got to bang out quick, this might be good enough.
Yeah. Again, it's all about doing more iterations, getting stuff done quicker, and this is again one of those algorithms that kind of gets you 80% of the way there out of the box.
All right. So what we're going to be looking at in this example is animation inside of Maya. So this is something that is near and dear to our heart. Obviously, we love animation in Maya. Yep. Character animation's sort of our bread and butter.
It's meat and potatoes.
We do a lot of it, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that we have in Maya is editable motion trails. So this allows you to take something that traditionally you'd be working in a graph editor,
yep.
Sort of playing around with X, Y, and Z curves, trying to adjust the position and the timing of your animation, and we bring it directly into the viewport. And this is one of the things that Maya, I love this tool. It came out, I think, in 2013.
And it's been had small. And again, it's when the people have been using it a lot, and they've been giving us a lot of requests relative to kind of how they can make it better. And again, you're saying that again you have this switch view, you have having to bring up the graph editor to edit these things. The character gets smaller. You're kind of switching back and forth. So anything that can bring you closer to kind of editing in 3D in context is kind of where we want to go.
Yeah, so like I can adjust the in-out, like if I wanted to have a fast out or a slow out, or adjust the overall slope of that curve, I can do that obviously in the graph editor, but you're working with X, Y, and Z curves. It's not necessarily the most efficient workflow, right? So if we go ahead and we add onto this underneath the visualize and editable motion trail, you can see that we now have a nice visual cue as to where that foot's going. There's color coding based on where the foot is, whether they're pre-frames or post-frames. So if the curve was going in a circle, you could tell if it's the beginning of the animation, or forward time or backward time. We can also adjust a lot of the attributes on this motion trail. So we could make the trail a little thicker. We could, instead of having it on the whole amount of time, we could give it how many frames on and how many frames off we want to have. Maybe put some fading on there. So some of this color stuff was new in 2016. We can also show, we can color the keyframes or show the keyframes on this. We could show all the keyframes. So there's a lot of control to filter out the amount of data that you're getting represented in this. And not only is it just a visualization tool in the viewport, but it's actually gives you the ability to manipulate the underlying animation. So if we grab that keyframe and start repositioning it, obviously it's going to be updating the XYZ values on those three curves all at the same time. And we can also show the tangents on this. So if we show the in and the out tangent, that allows me to basically go in here and start to reshape the overall profile of where that foot's going to go. So it gives me the ability to really kind of fine tune this and get that foot doing exactly what I want. Another thing that it does that's really quite nice is it also gives me the ability to adjust timing. So not only can we change where it is positionally, but by turning on the timing beads, we can adjust the tangents or the in-outs on that function curve too. So we can just go in here and say, give me those timing beads. You can see that as I grab that timing bead and start to move it, I can adjust, and I let go here. You can see that it's changing the slope or the amount of acceleration or deceleration that foot has going into that function curve. So as I start to pull those timing beads out, we're slowing the time down, we get a slow out. If I push the timing beads together, obviously it's going to do a fast in. So it's going to make that accelerate into that keyframe and then kind of push out of it a little bit faster. So really trying to bring the things that the animator wants to do into the 3D viewport and get away from using the function curve editor, which I think is awesome.
And again, kind of this backed up with the animation performance, where you can get now interactive performance with your characters, and even not just playback but editing, right? This is really, again, it's just more iterations, better feedback, makes you do more better work.
I like it. All right, so let's jump over to that other version of Maya and talk about some other stuff that's kind of cool. So color management. Big deal.
Big deal.
We made some pretty awesome improvements to the color management workflow inside of Maya. It's 2015 extension 1.
Yep.
And it wasn't just a simple linear workflow. We have a complete color management system based on Autodesk SendColor. So this allows you to work in a linear fashion, obviously, but you can also have multiple lookups and have those applied as transforms on top of your viewport and your renders, right?
Well, I think obviously a lot of people think of color management as the render being color managed.
It's not just a linear workflow.
Yeah,
it's
and
much
again,
more than that.
Linear workflows are really the sort of the default standard now in the industry to do physically based rendering, whether it's for film and games. So really, in order for us to do this correctly, it was about 1.5 years of work to go from from all the file in nodes to all of the the color pots to the viewports to the rendering. So there's really, it's a full comprehensive system.
Render agnostic.
And render agnostic. And again, it supports open color IO. So if you have open color IO based pipeline, you can do that again. And Daryl will show you again the idea of kind of it being rules based and it kind of being something that we don't want. If you know that it's working, then
it's on by default.
It's on by default, and again, you shouldn't know that it's working.
It's on by default, and by default, it would be set. Your view transform would be set to sRGB, not Rec 709. I want a little more pop in this, so I put it to Rec 709.
And again, it's a very customizable system. It's got a lot of rules that make it friendly to pipelines, but again, it should really just work out of the box.
So basically, what we're doing is we're defining a render space. It's always going to be linear.
Yep.
There's going to be different choices based on the primaries that the linear space is set in. And then on top of that, we do a transform, which is like a lookup, essentially, on the viewer, independent from the viewport and the renderer. And essentially, you can then have different tone maps or different views. If someone did a really great grade in Flame, they could save that out, and you could load it up as an add new inside of here.
Yeah, or if you kind of, you have a workflow where you're bringing in footage. I mean, obviously, we're in a full CG thing here, but if you have images that are coming in, you want to be able to match whatever pipeline you're doing. If you're doing visual effects, to be able to have the viewport match, just even the tone map coming from the camera or whatever.
Right, of course. And you mentioned the rules. This is new in 2016,
it is,
so it builds on top of the foundational work that was done in 2015 Extension 1. And what it does is it allows you to make some rules that are going to use, like let's just call it norm, right? To to use tokens, essentially. So you could say, when I bring in images in, look at every image file, the name of that image, and if it's got normal or norm in the name and then star after it, I want those guys to be raw, right? All my normal maps, I don't want to have any color mapping information tweaking those normals. I want those to be raw images.
Just go right in,
So just by using a little naming token and being smart with your file textures, you don't have to manually do that work. And that's something that we would have to manually do. You'd have to go through every bump node that had a normal map on it and say, this is a normal, it's not sRGB. This is a normal, it's not sRGB. So things like your specularity maps or your transparency maps, your normal maps, you could set up different filtering that will basically work when you bring them in, or you can have them apply the rules to a scene that already exists. All right, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is XGen in Maya 2016. So there's been a lot of improvements performance-wise in 2016. It's threaded now, much faster than it used to be. But from a usability standpoint, I mean, XGen is a complicated thing, right?
It is.
It's pretty hardcore. And
it's weapons grade, as Kamal Mystery would say.
Yes, and it's been used in many feature films. The artists that spend every day in it love it. But it's been hard, honestly, for people to get their head around, right? So in 2016, we've done some stuff to try to get people going in the right direction.
And again, some of it's obvious. Some of it's, again, it's things like we just had to fix some things that made it hard for people to integrate it into their day-to-day workflows. There were sort of things that unless you knew where things were, it was really hard to get to. And again, one of the things that we had done was we had kind of decided to kind of move on from Maya Fur and Hair. So to kind of move on from that, we wanted to make sure that we could do all the same features inside of XGen, and again also provide some starting points.
So that's what the XGen library is. And the thing that's really cool about this is not only do we have what the traditional Fur system had for all the presets, and these are, you add them on here and then you go in and you can start to rip them apart and see how they were done. But you can also save your own out, and you can see that I've obviously been working with this and saving some of my own out. So this makes it easily shareable, right? These presets, you can package them up, you can take them from machine to machine. So we're hopeful that some people will start making some cool grooms and share them with other people. But if they don't, at the very least, you've got a starting point of some stuff that you can explore and start to rip apart to kind of see how they work. So let's just grab this lion. Why not? We'll grab llama. We'll put llama on him today. So the description, based on how it's generated, you're going to have some options that you need to set up first. This one's pretty straightforward, so we'll just say import that guy. Maya's going to go through. It's going to create all the different guides that are needed to generate this, and then obviously go through and do the initial preview for us also. So you can see in a matter of a few seconds, we were able to get a pretty nice starting point, and we get that nice feedback directly inside of Viewport 2.0 before we even commit to a software render.
You can obviously, at render time, crank this up and get a much denser groom. But again, really what you're just trying to do is get enough direction, not perfection, is really kind of the guide here. And then when you go at render time, you're kind of, you're not kind of getting surprised that first time you hit render.
Yeah, because renders take time.
Renders do take time.
All right, so the last thing that we're going to talk about really quickly is, it's almost like the democratization of effects, bringing them down to the generalist. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do something called a guided simulation. So guided simulation, this is kind of a core concept for Bifrost in general, is the ability to take low-res information and have it guide or ultimately drive or advect information onto high-res information, higher-res sims. So you can either do this with a low-res sim that then drives a high-res sim, or in this example, we're going to use a deforming piece of geometry as a guide to ultimately make some large ocean wave effects.
Well, I think that the workflow there is you can art direct a given shot, or in this case use a procedural deformer to kind of create the waves and get it how you want it, and then kind of kind of keep a certain look, and then kind of just add the simulation on top.
So what we just did is we created a liquid from that object, and obviously it made an object. It's filled the whole thing in, right? Which is how we would have worked previously inside of Maya. Now what we want to do is we want to use that same object that we're using to generate that liquid, actually also get guided by that object. So let's go ahead and just jump over to my channel box and make a pool to hold this guy, because that liquid will all just fall to the ground, which isn't what we want to have happen. So we're going to add to our selection the liquid object and the Bifrost liquid and the collision object. So we'll just go up to Bifrost and tell it to collide with that guy. And now we'll go ahead and we're going to grab that piece of geometry and that Bifrost liquid, and we're going to tell it that that's going to be a guide for it. So we'll say Bifrost guide, add this as a guide shape, and the last thing that we need to do is just jump in here and tell Bifrost in its attributes on that container that we actually do want that, we don't need spatial adaptivity turned on, but we want that actual object to be driven by that guide. So let's go down here to guided simulation and just throw that guy back on there. And we'll rewind this one more time. And you can see now that liquid is only going to exist on the top.
Yeah,
which means I can increase the resolution, I can get better render, better render times, better simulation times, lower overhead on disk. Lots of good things happen with that.
Well, and again, simulation, it's costly, it takes time, and again, you have to create caches, and again, anytime that you can reduce the amount of sim time, you can do more sims, and anytime you can reduce the cache time, increases the render time. So it's really, it's really that simple.
All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and just add a foam model on top of that guy also. So where there's thresholds that are gonna exceed, we're gonna have a second generation of particles. It's gonna give us a nice kind of whitewater kind of capping foam stuff happening on top of it. All I have to do is, we can kind of clean the look of this guy up a little bit before we sim that. We'll turn that off. We just hit play on this guy. What Maya's done, if we highlight this, you can see that it's going through, and it's the first swipe through the time slider is sending information to Bifrost. Bifrost lives outside of Maya. It's completely decoupled from Maya.
Yep.
So it processes the information, and then it pushes it back into Maya in the form of this cache, essentially a scratch cache, a RAM-based cache. So you can see as soon as we start doing that, obviously we've already got that sim automatically starts adhering to that guy. And while this is happening in the background, I can go in here and I can start working on this, right? Like I can totally go in here and start to maybe change the color of those Bifrost particles that we're visualizing in the viewport, or start playing around with different meshing attributes. Lots of control that I can change to visualize this stuff while this is going on.
And I think again, trying to talk about ease of use or democratization. Again, the Bifrost framework, we had to kind of start over to be able to get the particle counts that you need to have realistic simulations, right? There's simulations that can get into the hundreds of millions of particles, and when you have hundreds of millions of particles, they're gonna look good because they're so rich and detailed. And again, the original Maya infrastructure couldn't handle hundreds of thousands of particles. So really, in order to get some of these effects, you had to know all the tips and tricks that were sort of hidden inside of Maya to even get a decent result. So really, with Bifrost now, just the ability to be able to generate these super detailed simulations really allows more people to kind of even try this stuff.
Yeah, I dig it.
I dig it too.
All right, well that's pretty much what we wanted to talk about today. So, Maya 2016, Maya in general, come a long way.
Yep.
We're trying to make a lot of the tools artist friendly, more accessible, bringing stuff up to the surface.
Yep.
Giving you some magic buttons that take things that used to be a lot of clicks or a lot of work or a lot of tedious man hours to get things like skin weighting that just give you a good starting point. And obviously with Bifrost, it's pretty easy to get excited about tools like that.
For sure. And again, we want to thank the community for kind of being on beta, being in all the different forums that they're on, and kind of keeping on pushing on ideas and keeping on asking us to do more of these type things. Because again, everything you see in Maya is only because people ask us to put it in there. So again, we have a great team that kind of takes that feedback and turns it into the product. But certainly, this is a user-driven product.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. As a user, I love it.
Very cool. Thank you, Daryl.
Cheers, everyone.
See you later.